The FY fiscal 2022 proposed general fund budget is $112,535,000. Our current budget for fiscal 21 is $96,550,000. The County Council received requests for operating and capital items of just over $119 million, which is $22.5 million more than the current fiscal 21 budget. The fiscal 22 proposed general fund budget is $112,535,000, which is $15,985 more than the current year budget, and that is 16.56% more than the current year budget. However, included in this increase of almost $16 million, over $14 million is for transfers to capital projects fund of $10 million and for capital outlay and equipment purchases of $4 million. And to offset those basically new expenses and one-time expenses, the budget is funded with revenues of $20.8 million from prior year fund balance. The fiscal 22 budget for operating expenses in the general fund is increasing by 3.86%. That's a fairly modest increase, especially when you look at our total budget increasing by over 16%. Really just under 4% is going to operating expenses. The budget does include a 1 cent increase to the real property tax rate above what is allowed under the current real property tax cap, as authorized by the voters of Talbot County in November of 2020. And public safety is a top priority in this budget. I will now ask Mr. Clay to go through some budget strategy items.
So as council is aware, in developing this budget, the strategy surrounded it is that we were looking at focusing on 3 primary areas: personnel, retention and recruitment, strategic projects, and efficiency in our processes. You can go ahead and advance the slide. And as Angela remarked, when you look at the budget, we were looking at a modest increase in the operational line item of the budget, but clearly an investment in our capital improvement projects. In the previous presentation, they talked about, the hope of moving into a year of recovery. That's what we're seeing nationally, regionally, across the state of Maryland. There's a lot of grant opportunities coming, and hopefully the number of COVID cases will continue to decrease as the number of vaccinations increase. So investing in a year of recovery was some thought behind this budget. So one of the things we talk about here in Talbot County is outlined in our comprehensive plan, as well as our community resiliency and hazard mitigation plan, are the 5 pillars that hold our community up. And those are public safety and health infrastructure, environment, education, and economic stability. So whether it's emergency management or even investing budgetarily, we keep those in our mind. So as we invest in a capital improvement project, we can see that in this year, for example, you can go ahead and advance the slide. You can see this year, just as a couple examples, the budget supports, as the voters indicated they wanted to see at the last election, and a graduated expansion of paramedic services in the north end of the county, which will require adding a station and a paramedic crew. It contains funding enhancements to our volunteer fire departments to address operational costs, as well as supporting personnel for retention and recruitment. So again, those pillars of public safety and health were touched there. Funding for the extension of sanitary sewer services into the Bay 100 area especially, which is an environmental project because we're rescuing a number of septic tanks that may be failing and putting toxins into our waterways. Construction of key road projects or infrastructure projects An example of that is Airport Road and Goldsboro Neck Road. That is a secondary means of ingress and egress to the Bay 100 area, and frankly, an evacuation route for that area. And council has prioritized that project. So these are a few projects that are behind that bigger increase in the capital improvement program. Again, the capital improvement program is an investment into our future, and frankly, a number of the projects in this are long overdue and need to be addressed. And just merely by engaging to this level in this program, we are trying to address and stimulate economic development as well. I'll hand it back to you, Angela.
Okay. Again, the modest increase in the operations budget of just over 3.8% includes a number of new and important items, with the primary focus again being on public safety. The first one is we do have funding for increased retirement expense associated with potentially joining the law enforcement officers pension system, LEOPS, for the sheriff's office. This has been something that's been discussed for a number of years, and we do have the funding for the retirement expense in this proposed budget. We also have salary scale adjustments for 911 dispatchers, EMT, paramedics, and correctional officers to address recruitment and retention issues. Again, those departments have had significant burdens placed on them during the last year and are often hard to recruit. So hopefully by adjusting our salary scale, we can recruit and retain our employees in those departments. We have added 6 new positions, 4 additional positions for a 12-hour-a-day emergency medical services unit. That is our surge unit that we started in the current fiscal year, primarily being funded through overtime and some part-time employees. The goal is now to make that a permanent, or be a permanently staffed position with full-time positions. So those are the 4 positions for that unit. We've added 1 legal assistant for the Office of the State's Attorney and 1 administrative fiscal position for the Department of Public Works. The Talbot County Public Schools is funded at the same level as in fiscal 2021, which is $532,000 more than the state mandated maintenance of effort funding level. And this budget does include a step increase for eligible full-time county employees. This slide shows our revenues in the proposed budget as compared to the current budget in major category areas. In property taxes, being our largest revenue stream, is going up just over 4.5%. Part of that increase, which is quite a bit above what we would normally expect to see, which would be in the 2 to 3% range, is because of the 1 cent additional penny that we were able to add to the property tax rate due to the change implemented by the voters last November. Income taxes we're projecting to be basically constant, and most of our other revenue streams are pretty much bouncing around a little bit, but not too much. The 2 other changes, both increases that are quite significant, are transfer from other funds, which is going up over, $500,000, and that is a transfer from the special revenue fund to help offset debt service expenses in the current budget, and the use of prior year fund balances. But again, the majority of that is going to capital projects and capital outlay, which are one-time expenses. And here is a graphic just showing the distribution of those funds, which is pretty consistent from prior years, other than the use of fund balances higher this year. But that is probably not something that will continue year after year. This is more of a one-time transfer. And our expenditures, again, public schools is a significant portion of our budget. It's over 40% of our budget just to the one agency. And that number is actually going down slightly. And the reason why it's going down slightly is because of debt service. When we prepared the fiscal 21 budget, we had not actually borrowed the funds for the Easton Elementary School. So we put in an estimate in the fiscal 21 budget. When we actually borrowed the funds, that number went down, and our first payment for the Easton Elementary School of principal won't actually happen until July 1, 2021, which is in our fiscal 22 budget. So we didn't have a principal payment due in fiscal 21 on the Easton Elementary School. So that's part of the difference there, the timing and the amounts. Other county operations are going up by 8%, and that includes all our other county operations, our county departments, as well as the health department, the library, Chesapeake College, the volunteer fire departments. All those other groups are in that number. So our operating expense is only going up by 3.84%. In addition to that, again, where the big increases are in capital outlay and our transfer to other funds. $10 million of our transfer to other funds is going to the capital projects fund. $1.8 million is going to the golf course for the renovation and, well, the replacement of the irrigation system that's over 40 years old at that site. So those are really the major drivers of the increase in this year's budget. And here's a graphic again showing, public schools and county operations are pretty much the same portion of our budget. And we have transfers to other funds as well as some capital outlay and some contingency money in this budget. And so far I've just been discussing general fund, but since $10 million of our general fund budget is a transfer to the capital projects fund, I did want to put the slide in just to show where we are proposing to spend funds in fiscal 22 in the capital projects area. First thing you'll notice is the capital projects budget is $18.8 million. So some of these items are going to be funded through grants and through long-term borrowing, as well as cash from our transfers. So we're looking for land acquisition, and this is not to increase land acquisition. It's to have the opportunity to be able to purchase land with cash as we have opportunities for future county projects. We actually do already have $2 million in the capital projects budget, but that's to be funded by debt. And basically with the rules with borrowing, sometimes it doesn't make sense to borrow for smaller land purchases. So we want to be able to propose legislation through the capital projects fund to allow us to purchase land for future uses with our reserve, with our cash in that fund rather than borrowing. We do have some overlay projects for our parking lots. We do have the first phase of our public safety center. That'll be $5 million, and that will house the sheriff's office as well as other public safety operations. The sheriff's office does need to vacate the Talbot County Business Center in the near future, so this is a priority project. We do have some courthouse roof repairs and replacements that need to be done. And then our next big public safety project is expansion of Ems stations, particularly in the north end of the county. And we have broadband expansion. And this broadband expansion is to provide broadband services in the unserved area of the county. It will not compete with any current providers. This is to go into the areas that have not been offered service by the private providers. Under highways and streets, we have funding for a Black Dog Alley that will start some improvements for that road that are necessary for traffic safety, and as well as funding for Airport Road, again, to look at the expansion of that road in terms of widening to allow it to handle the type of traffic that it is now receiving. And this will be phase one of the Airport Road upgrades and expansion. For parks, we have some funding to continue with the Frederick Douglass Park on the Tuckahoe. We are trying to do the next phase so that park can be more readily used by our citizens and visitors. And we do have some funding for a study of the Bill Burton Park down on the Choptank River. And our final item in the capital budget is our public schools. This is the first phase of the Easton High School roof replacement. As roof. It'll be a 2-year project, and this is the first phase of it to allow this project to start for half the school roof replacement in the summer of 22. And then we'll have some funds that will go into capital projects fund reserves, $3.8 million. So those will be available for the next year. And as you just heard me say, the Easton High School roof is a 2-year project. We will need some of those funds to fund the next phase of that project, as well as some of the other ones. And this budget is using $20.8 million of fund balance. It is a big number, but it is not, we're not being foolhardy with our funds. This is a summary of our fund balances going back to fiscal 2009, and this is our discretionary fund balance. So in addition to our discretionary fund balance, we still have our rainy day fund, which is in the $13 million range. So we have that, plus we have these funds. Back in 2009, we had $21.5 million, and that was a serious economic downturn in 2009 and 10, and we did use almost $17 million in those 2 years to shore up county revenues. We do not expect any potential downturn in fiscal 22 and beyond to be of that magnitude. So I'm very comfortable that when we finish fiscal 22, we'll have a fund balance, a discretionary fund balance of $15 million, which is more than enough to weather any potential downturns that are being projected at this point for the next few years. So I think we are in good shape, even with a fairly significant use, but we need to use these funds for infrastructure repairs that have not been done for a number of years in the county. And the proposed budget will have public hearings held on Tuesday, May 4th at 2 p.m. and at 7 p.m. And the public is always encouraged to submit written comments because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So if people want to submit public comments, the address is publiccomment@talbotcountymd.gov. And for more information on the budget, we will post the budget, this PowerPoint, and a summary in the next few days on our county website. And that is the end of the slideshow.
When we went to the Talbot County electorate last year and asked them to put a measure on the ballot to modify in a fairly modest way the tax cap to allow that extra penny to keep it at a solid 2% rather than consumer price index or the lower of that or 2%. We made a commitment, and we said where there is a critical need is in public safety, and it's both in the capital needs with the construction of the sheriff's office on the horizon, but also the recruitment and retention of our officers, and the aspects of this budget that have to do with public safety salaries, not only the sheriff's office, but in emergency services and so forth, all of those public safety functions. We're making a real commitment. Yes, there's an increase, but as the budget presentation pointed out, we've managed to hold that to less than 4% with this new support from the property tax. This I believe is a responsible and sustainable budget, and is fulfilling, as we made that commitment to the public, those critical functions and funding them going forward. We heard from the public that these are important, these need to be funded, and we're true to our word here. This is where this money is going.
Thank you, Mr. Lesher. Mr. DeVillio?
Well, I'm terrified. It's a big increase, and it definitely makes me nervous. But as I go back and I look at all the projects that have been on hold for years and have been discussed and ideas thrown around, I'm glad that we have some incredible department heads, Ms. Lane is fantastic. And when you sit down and run through this budget and know about what has been planned in the past, what we're working towards, and the goal of where we'll be, I know that we're making some huge improvements, both in traffic and in safety and in all departments, really. But it comes at a time when money isn't just freely flowing. You look around and businesses are either closed or hiring right now. It's a very odd time, and I am very nervous because I know we still have a road to recovery to come out of this, and we're not there yet. But I've got a lot of pride in our county, in both the citizens, us who've been elected, and those that we've chosen to be the department heads to lead us in the right direction. And I'm taking a lot of comfort in that, knowing that we're going to get some big boxes checked off that have needed to be checked for many years. Some of them expensive. Building buildings is expensive, but you know, they've been sitting there. We've been fortunate with what we've had, or where we've been. So I'm looking forward to things moving forward with this, hearing the public comment, seeing if there's any other ideas from the public as we have the upcoming hearings. But right now, I am nervous going into this.
Yes, I must say, quite honestly, this has been probably one of the more congenial budgetary processes that I have had the pleasure of being a part of. I guess it takes away stress when you got so much surplus money to work with. But to some of the point that Mr. DeVillio was speaking to, I knew, and I think several of us knew, that these capital expenses were going to come due, and we were going to have to step up and pay for them. I think the way that this budget is set up, yes, there is a large increase, but when you look at the operational size, as Mr. Lesher pointed out, less than 4% of the operational, and that's the part that keeps eating, the operational side. So yes, you have a big capital side that you have to pay out. That stops after a period in time. It's the operational side, the dollars and the benefits. That's a very modest increase, and I can live with that. I don't know whether that gives Mr. DeVillio any more comfort, but to see that operational number is not a huge number, in my point of view, gives me some rest. Again, this process was probably one of the more expedient processes we went through. I think we only got together a handful of times. I remember times when we would be back there all night long, beating the table and drinking coffee until almost midnight. But I guess COVID does have its benefits, right? So anyway, I just want to say that I'm very pleased with the budget. I believe when I started with this council so many years ago, I think we were about $68 million budget, and now we're over $100 million. But it's not reckless spending, and it's not an increase just for the sake of increase. You know, we had to do some things on the capital side that we knew that we were going to have to pay. We had to do some things on the operational side when it comes to retention and recruitment and keeping good quality people here. So this is the price you have to pay to do business in the 21st century. So I think Talbot Countyans should be, and we'll hear the comments when they open up for public hearing, but I think Talbot Countyans should be, I'm hope, satisfied as to the process that this council went through in paying the things that we had to pay. Again, this is not reckless spending. You know, to see the Board of Education at 42% of our budget and the county at 43, I don't have that slide in front of me. Probably the closest that I've seen that those two slices on a pie chart in quite some time. Normally, the Board of Ed was around 50%, and county operations was somewhere around 42, 43%. So to see those numbers evening out a little bit more, again, if you're a county citizen and you want it balanced in those two departments as far as public education spending and county operational spending, you got it. So to me, it's a win-win. You're paying on some capital things that you knew you're going to have to pay on. You're putting investment into your people and on the operational side at a very modest and a very thoughtful way, frugal way, and you're keeping your schools funded at a respectable level. I think it's a win-win across the board for everybody, in my opinion.
Terrifying is a good word. I agree with Mr. DeVillio, and I will echo what Mr. Pack said was, I remember my first year on the council when we had to cut a budget and slice and dice, and it was painful because the county had, as Ms. Lane said, in the 2 years prior, had used $17 million in fund balance. And I remember someone saying that it was a lot easier to do a budget when you're cutting than do a budget when you're growing. I'm not sure I agree with that. I think they're both equally challenging because you're deciding on where that growth has to go. And I too look at what the operating expenses are. And, I know what we call the 3 or 4 page summary, which now maybe is 5, separating out what is capital outlay and really looking at the true operating expenses that do come back. I think that was Tommy Duncan's term, the things that keep on eating, right, Mr. Pack? We're dating ourselves. So we have a lot of that, and normally you don't see the school board and the county at the 42. Really, we had this big, huge chunk this year, but we haven't been able to do these items. And the other thing to rest in is that while we are allocating, I think it was 16 million or something for the capital, those still have to be approved at a later date. This is just authorizing us to do it. But when any project comes up, whether it's next month or in 6 months or a year, or even if it's the following, this is really just we're setting the table. If something goes wrong, this $20 million that we're transferring, if something goes wrong, God forbid, right? Then we can call that back. This is not approval to spend the money. This is just putting it there. Everything goes along. We have the money to do it. We'll do these projects, and there's some that we just have to do. But just people need to know that any capital spending requires a whole separate bill to truly authorize the expenditure of the money. So it's ready to go, but we haven't, spent that yet. So all that's to say is, yes, going from 60 million to 112 some million and almost doubling a budget in my time on the council is, yes, Mr. DeVillio, absolutely terrifying. But it's a great job, and it's all, I'm being very conservative, but comfortable with where those monies are going. So thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Price. It means a lot for Ms. Price to get comfortable, that's for sure. So, Council, I think we've done a phenomenal job. All your comments, staff, Angela, Clay, and Jess, and all the staff that's put this stuff together. Everybody has done such a great job. I'm very proud of the way we put this together. You're right, Ms. Price. So even though we've got capital budgets here for, $18 million, that doesn't mean we'll spend it. So, and it's got to be approved. And these things, since I've been on council too, have been building up too. So I feel pretty comfortable. Mr. DeVillio has called me a couple times with some concerns, and I think we all would be human if we all wasn't concerned because of what can happen. We all have businesses. We're all business people. We take all this stuff to heart. So I mean, we really try to do what's beneficial to the county, and we're building a future. We're building retention and recruitment. We're keeping people. That's what it's about. I mean, if anybody knows how hard it is to keep employees, it's all of us, and it's the nature of what's happening right now with the pandemic, and we're all going to recover from this very well, I hope. But me sitting here as president, it's a big lift on my shoulders, and I do appreciate council attitude on being open-minded, like Mr. Pack said. We really went through this pretty well with a fine-tooth comb, and the public has to understand we really never really really butted heads on much here this year, and I'm proud of everybody from doing that, because it was difficult to put together. And to have Angela by our side and really helps a lot with the security of what we're doing here.
Budget together, and I think there's strategy wrapped around it. I think it's sound. Ms. Price brought up a good point that capital enabling legislation has to be passed on capital projects. I think it maintains frugality in the operating sense and investment in the community at a time where we need to invest in the community to stimulate the economy with our capital improvement program. So I think it's a sound budget. I think it maintains frugality for the long run. And again, it's an investment. Thank you.